Kira Lynn's eyes snapped open as red warning lights bathed her small quarters in crimson. The ship groaned around her like a wounded animal, metal plates grinding against each other as the vessel tilted at an impossible angle. She rolled out of her narrow bunk, bare feet hitting the cold deck, as another alarm joined the chorus of mechanical screams echoing through the corridors. The young Vellani scientist stumbled toward her door, her forearms reaching out to steady herself against the walls. Her pale blue skin felt clammy with fear sweat as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The research vessel Gentle Current had been her home for 3 cycles now, carrying her across the galaxy as she studied plant samples from distant worlds. It was supposed to be safe work, peaceful work. But nothing felt safe anymore. She pressed her palm against the door sensor and stepped into chaos. Other crew members rushed past her, their elongated faces twisted with panic. The ship's artificial gravity flickered, making everyone stumble like drunks. Emergency lighting cast dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere deep in the ship's belly, she could hear the death rattle of failing engines. "What's happening?" she called out to Veltar, an older engineer who was hurrying past with a tool. Kit clutched to his chest. He stopped, his large black eyes wide with terror. "Engine core breach," he whispered. "We're drifting into the dead zone, human space." The words hit her like ice water. Human space. Every child in the Vellani collective grew up hearing the stories. Humans were monsters who wore the faces of civilized beings. They smiled while they tortured. They spoke of peace while sharpening their knives. The galaxy feared them for good reason. Kira Lynn followed Veltar down the corridor, past crew members who huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed, frightened voices. The conversations all blended together into one terrible whisper that seemed to follow her through the ship. "My cousin saw what they did to the science station at Kepler 7. Nothing left but ash and bones. They eat their prisoners, keep them alive for days while they feast. The screaming can be heard through vacuum, that's how loud it gets." She wanted to cover her ears, but the stories kept coming. Tales of human brutality that had been passed down through generations, ships that vanished without trace after encountering human patrols, colonies that went silent overnight. The humans called it peacekeeping, but everyone knew the truth. The Gentle Current shuddered again, and somewhere in the distance, metal tore with a sound like a scream. Emergency power kicked in, dimming the lights even further. The life support systems wheezed and coughed, struggling to keep them all alive in the cold void of space. Kira Lynn made her way to the observation deck, hoping to see something, anything that might tell her where they were. The stars looked wrong here, arranged in patterns she didn't recognize. This was human territory, far from the safe borders of the collective. They were alone, helpless, and drifting deeper into enemy space with every passing moment. Through the thick, transparent steel window, she watched their distress beacon flash its desperate signal into the darkness. But who would answer? Out here, beyond the reach of civilization, only monsters prowled the void, and everyone knew that when humans found a damaged alien ship, there were no survivors to tell the tale. The ship groaned again, and Kira Lynn closed, her eyes wondering if death might be kinder than whatever was coming for them in the darkness between the stars. The darkness outside suddenly blazed with light. Kira Lynn pressed her face against the observation window and felt her heart stop. A massive shape emerged from the void, its hull bristling with weapon systems that could turn their small research vessel into cosmic dust in seconds. The human warship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Gentle Current, its black metal surface scarred by countless battles. Red targeting beams swept across their ship like the eyes of some ancient predator. The Steadfast moved with deadly grace, positioning itself to block any escape route. Not that escape was possible with their engines dead and life support failing. They were trapped, helpless prey waiting for the hunters to make their move. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Jimin of the Human Defense Force ship Steadfast." A voice crackled through their communication system. The words were spoken in perfect Vellani, which somehow made them more terrifying. "Prepare to be boarded. Do not resist and you will not be harmed." Kira Lynn stumbled backward from the window. The voice had been calm, almost polite, but she knew better than to trust human lies. Everyone knew they spoke sweetly before they struck. Her crewmates were already abandoning their posts, running through the corridors like scattered insects when the lights came on. She ran toward the biology lab, her sanctuary deep in the ship, where she kept her plant samples and research equipment. If she was going to die, she wanted to be surrounded by the peaceful things she loved. The lab's thick doors might buy her a few extra minutes of life, though she knew it wouldn't matter in the end. The docking clamps engaged with a sound like thunder. The gentle current shook as the human ship locked onto their hull like a parasite, attaching to its host. Through the ship's internal sensors, she could hear the boarding airlocks cycling open with mechanical precision. The hunters were coming aboard. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. Not the quick, panicked steps of her fellow Villani, but the slow, deliberate march of armored boots. The humans moved through their ship like they owned it, their powered suits clanking with each step. She could hear the whir of servos and the hiss of hydraulics as the mechanical monsters stalked through her home. From her hiding spot in the lab, pressed against the wall behind a growth tank full of crystal flowers, Kiralyn listened to the sounds of her people's capture. Terrified screams echoed through the ventilation system. Crew members pleaded for mercy in voices high with panic. The sounds cut through her heart like knives, but what frightened her most was how the humans responded. Their voices never changed, never rose in anger or excitement. They spoke to her screaming crewmates with the same calm, professional tone. They might use to discuss the weather, cold, controlled, completely without emotion. Secure the engineering section, watch for hidden compartments. Medical team to Deck 3, we have injured. Sweep complete on Level 2, moving to biologics. That last transmission made her blood freeze. They were coming for her lab. Coming. For her. She could hear them getting closer, their metal feet ringing against the deck plates like a countdown to her death. The door to her lab was strong, but it wouldn't hold against human weapons for more than a few seconds. Kiralyn curled up behind the growth tanks and tried to make herself as small as possible. Maybe they wouldn't see her. Maybe they would miss her hiding spot and move on to terrorize someone else. But deep down she knew it was hopeless. The humans never missed anything. And when they found her, the real nightmare would begin. The white room was so bright it hurt her eyes. Kiralyn sat hunched on a simple metal bench, her forearms wrapped around herself as she tried to stop shaking. The walls were perfectly clean, without a single mark or stain. She had expected a torture chamber filled with cruel instruments and bloodstains. Instead, she found herself in what looked almost like a medical bay, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Humans were clever with their deceptions. They probably kept their rooms clean, so the screams would echo better. The bright lights were probably meant to blind their victims before the real pain began. Hours seemed to pass, though it might have been minutes. Time moved strangely when you were waiting to die. She had lost track of her crewmates after the armored figures dragged them all from their hiding places. Were they already dead? Were they being tortured in rooms just like this one? The not knowing was almost worse than her own fear. The door hissed open with a soft pneumatic sound. Kiralyn pressed herself back against the wall, making herself as small as possible. A figure in full combat armor stepped through the doorway, their face hidden behind a reflective visor. The suit was massive, making the human inside look like some kind of mechanical demon. She could hear the quiet hum of power systems and the soft whisper of filtered air. This was it. This was how she would die. Please, she whispered in broken standard, the human trade language she had learned from textbooks. The words came out wrong, her accent thick and desperate. Please, no hurt. I am just scientist. Study plants. No weapons. No fighting. She pressed her face to her knees, waiting for the pain to begin. Instead, she heard something unexpected. A soft click, followed by the quiet hiss of releasing pressure seals. When she looked up, the human was removing their helmet. The face that emerged was nothing like the monster she had expected. It belonged to a young woman with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed genuinely concerned. There were no cruel scars or filed teeth, no signs of the savage bloodlust that every Villani child learned to fear. Just a person who looked tired and worried. "Hey there," the human said softly, setting her helmet aside. Her voice was gentle, almost musical. "My name is Lieutenant Sana. Can you understand me?" Kirillin nodded frantically, too shocked to speak. This wasn't how the stories went. The humans were supposed to be snarling beasts who delighted in causing pain. This woman looked like she was genuinely trying to help. Good. I need to check. If you're hurt. Sana moved slowly, keeping her hands visible. I can see you have some cuts from when your ship was damaged. May I look at them? No torture, Kirillin managed to whisper. Something sad flickered across Sana's face. No torture, I promise. I just want to make sure you're okay. The lieutenant activated a small device on her wrist. Medical to holding bay 3. I need a trauma kit and a xenobiology scanner. Patient is conscious and responsive but has multiple lacerations. While they waited, Sana pulled up a chair and sat down at a respectful distance. She didn't loom over Kirillin or try to intimidate her. Instead, she moved with careful, deliberate motions that seemed designed to avoid causing fear. Your ship was badly damaged, Sana explained quietly. We found you drifting in a debris field. Are you in pain anywhere? Kirillin touched the cuts on her arms, where flying metal had sliced through her skin during the crash. They stung, but she had been too frightened to notice until now. The human's kindness was more confusing than any torture device could have. Over the next few days, Kirillin found herself talking with Lieutenant Sana more and more. The human woman brought her meals that didn't taste like prison food and asked gentle questions about Villani culture. It felt almost like having a friend, which made everything more confusing. Friends were supposed to be people from your own species, not the monsters who had captured your ship. But the questions kept getting stranger. Tell me about your research mission, Sana said one afternoon, sitting across from Kirillin in what she had learned was actually a guest quarters, not a prison cell. What kind of plants were you studying? Healing plants, Kirillin replied, grateful to talk about something that made sense. From the outer rim worlds. We collect samples, study their properties. Very peaceful work. Something flickered in Sana's eyes. Just the upper decks of your ship. Of course, where else would we work? Did you ever go to the lower levels, below deck 5? Kirillin blinked in confusion. There is no below deck 5. Our ship only has 5 decks total. I know every room. The door chimed and a tall man in a commander's uniform entered. His name tag read Hyun, and his face was serious, but not unkind. He carried a small data pad that glowed with soft blue light. Kirillin, he said, settling into a chair. We need to show you something. It's going to be difficult to see. He activated the datapad and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed the interior of a ship, her ship, the Gentle Current. But the rooms in the projection looked nothing like the vessel she knew. This is footage from your ship's lower decks, Commander Hyun explained gently. Decks 6 through 9. That's impossible, Kirillin whispered. We only have 5 decks. The hologram showed corridors she had never seen before. Laboratories filled with equipment she didn't recognize, and in the center of it all, holding cells, dozens of them, lined up like cages in some horrible zoo. We found 43 prisoners. Down there, Hyun continued, his voice steady but sad. Humans from the colony ships that went missing over the past 2 years, they were being used for medical experiments. The image shifted to show the cells more clearly. Inside were figures that barely looked human anymore, thin, pale, with hollow eyes that spoke of unspeakable suffering. Some had strange growths on their skin. Others showed signs of surgical procedures that had been performed without proper healing. No, Kirillin breathed, pressing her hands to her mouth. No, this can't be real. We're scientists. We study plants. We don't hurt people. Your ship's computer logs show regular supply deliveries, Sana added softly. Medical equipment, restraint systems, chemical compounds for biological research, all going to sections of the ship that were hidden from the regular crew. Kirillin stared at the hologram, her mind refusing to accept what she was seeing. The ship she had called home for 3 years had been carrying a secret cargo of horror. While she had been peacefully studying flower samples on the upper decks, people were being tortured just below her feet. The prisoners are recovering now, Commander Hyun said. Our medical team is doing everything they can, but some of the damage, some of it can't be undone. I didn't know, Kirillin whispered, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. I swear by the sacred rings I didn't know any of this existed. Sana leaned forward, her expression gentle but serious. We believe you, but we need to understand how this was possible. How could an entire crew not know what was happening on their own ship? The hologram flickered and changed, showing more evidence of the hidden laboratories. Each image was like a knife in Kira Lynn's heart, destroying everything she had believed about her people and her mission. Lieutenant Sana led Kira Lynn through the corridors of the human ship, past busy crew members who nodded politely as they walked by. None of them looked at her with hatred or disgust, even though she was technically their enemy. It made her stomach twist with confusion and guilt. "Are you sure you want to see this?" Sana asked as they approached the medical bay. "It's not easy to watch." Kira Lynn nodded, though her hands were shaking. She needed to see the truth with her own eyes. The holographic evidence had been horrible enough, but somehow her mind kept trying to find ways to deny it. Maybe the images had been faked. Maybe. This was all some elaborate human trick to turn her against her own people, but deep in her heart, she already knew better. The medical bay doors slid open, revealing a scene that would haunt her dreams forever. Row after row of beds filled the large room, each one occupied by a figure that barely looked human anymore. The survivors from her ship's hidden chambers lay connected to machines that beeped softly, monitoring their slow recovery. Human doctors and nurses moved between the beds with quiet efficiency. They checked vital signs, adjusted medications, and spoke in gentle voices to patients who often couldn't respond. Some of the rescued prisoners were awake, staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes that had seen too much suffering. "We've been working around the clock," Dr. Kim explained as she joined them. Her medical coat was wrinkled from long hours, and exhaustion showed in her face. Most of them haven't eaten real food in months. Their bodies were used to test new diseases, then treated with experimental cures, over and over again. Kira Lynn approached the nearest bed with trembling steps. The person lying there had once been a young man, probably not much older than herself. Now his skin was covered in strange patches where it had been repeatedly infected and healed. His arms showed dozens of injection sites, and parts of his hair had fallen out from whatever chemicals had been pumped into his system. "What's his name?" she whispered. "We don't know yet," Dr. Kim replied sadly. "Most of them can't remember their own names. The psychological trauma runs as deep as the physical damage." The young man's eyes slowly focused on Kira Lynn's face. For a moment, she saw recognition there, not of her personally, but of her species. She waited for him to scream, to call for help, to show the terror that any rational person would feel when facing their torturers. Instead, he just looked tired. Are you here to take me back?" he asked in a voice like broken glass. "No," Kira Lynn managed to say through her tears. "No, you're safe now. I promise." She moved from bed to bed, seeing the full scope of what her people had done. Children who had been stolen from colony ships and used as test subjects for growth hormones. Adults who had been infected with manufactured plagues to see how quickly they would die. Elderly people who had been kept alive far past their natural lifespan just to study the aging process. Each victim told the same story through their broken bodies. They had been treated not as people, but as laboratory animals, things to be used and discarded when they were no longer useful. The Villani Collective, her supposedly peaceful and enlightened government, had turned torture into a science. "Your research logs show this has been going on for over 5 years, Sana said quietly as they walked through the ward. "Dozens of ships like yours, all carrying hidden laboratories. Thousands of people disappeared." Kira Lynn stopped beside her bed where a middle-aged woman lay sleeping. Her chart showed that she had been infected with 17 different diseases during her captivity. Somehow, she had survived them all, but the cost was written in every line of her gaunt face. "I studied plants," Kira Lynn whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I was helping to find new medicines, but I was just the cover story." The next morning, Kira Lynn found herself in the human ship's other medical bay, the one treating her own people. She had asked Lieutenant Sana to see her former crewmates, expecting to find them chained up or thrown into dark cells like the prisoners on her ship had been. What she discovered instead shook her understanding of everything she thought she knew about humans. Veltar, the engineer, who had told her they were doomed, lay in a clean bed with his broken leg properly set and healing. The elderly Vellani looked up when he saw her, his large black eyes filled with confusion. "Kirillin, you're alive, but the humans? They captured us. Why aren't we—" He gestured weakly around the bright, clean room. "Where are the torture devices?" She couldn't answer him. Across the room, Dr. Yoon was carefully examining Nalzeth, the ship's communications officer. The Vellani woman had suffered burns during the engine explosion, and the human doctor was treating her injuries with the same gentle care Kirillin had seen given to the rescued prisoners. "The scarring should fade completely," Dr. Yoon was explaining, "through a translator device. We'll need to change the bandages twice daily, but there shouldn't be any permanent damage." Nalzeth stared at the human doctor like she was seeing a ghost. "You're helping me?" "Of course, medical care is a basic right, regardless of species or circumstances." Captain Jimin entered the medical bay, his uniform crisp despite the long hours he'd been working. Several other human officers followed him, including what looked like security personnel. Kirillin felt her stomach drop. This was it. Now they would see the true human nature. "We need to discuss the situation with your crew," Jimin said, his voice calm and professional. He activated a small holographic display that showed star charts of the surrounding space. 3 Vellani warships are approaching our position. They'll be here within 6 hours. The captured Vellani crew members looked at each other with growing hope. Rescue was coming. Their own people would save them from human captivity. But Jimin's next words changed everything. "According to our intelligence, those ships have orders to destroy any evidence of your illegal research program. That includes eliminating all witnesses, both human prisoners and Vellani crew members who might talk." The hope died in their eyes, replaced by dawning horror. "Command has given me authorization to hold you as prisoners of war," Jimin continued. "However, several of you are listed as civilians who had no knowledge of the experiments. Keeping you here when your own fleet arrives would essentially be a death sentence for all of us." He paused, looking around the room at the injured Vellani. "Therefore, I'm releasing Dr. Hel-Ani, Engineer Veltar, and Communications Officer Nalzeth to an escape pod. They'll have enough supplies to reach the neutral zone." "You're letting us go?" Veltar whispered. "The war criminals stay," Jimin said firmly. "But you 3 were clearly unaware of what was happening on your ship. You don't deserve to die for crimes you didn't commit." Kirillin watched in amazement as human crew members began preparing the escape pod. They loaded it with medical supplies, food, and navigation equipment. No one questioned the captain's decision. No one suggested that it might be easier to just keep all the prisoners. Dr. Hel-Ani, the ship's elderly botanist, was crying as the humans helped her into the escape pod. "Why?" she asked Captain Jimin. "Why show mercy to enemies?" Jimin's expression softened slightly. "Because that's what separates civilization from barbarism. We don't punish the innocent, even during war." As the escape pod launched safely away, from both ships, Kirillin realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. Her own people would have never shown such restraint. When the Vellani captured enemies, there were no releases, no mercy for civilians. Everyone was treated as a threat to be eliminated. But these humans, these supposed monsters, had risked their own safety to save people who belonged to the species that had tortured their friends and family. The communication center of the Steadfast buzzed with quiet activity as Lieutenant Sana worked at her station, headphones covering her ears as she monitored radio frequencies. Kirillin sat nearby, having been given permission to observe the humans at work. She found their efficiency fascinating, so different from the chaotic panic that had filled her own ship during the crisis. "Captain," Sana called out suddenly, her voice tight with concern, "I'm picking up encrypted Vellani transmissions. 3 ships closing fast on our position." Captain Jimin hurried over, his expression serious. "Can you break the encryption?" "Working on it now. The patterns are—" "Wait." Sana's fingers flew over her controls and slowly, voices began to emerge from the static. Vellani voices speaking, in the formal military dialect that Kirillin recognized from government broadcasts. As the words became clearer, Kirillin felt her blood turn to ice. Cleanup Protocol 7 is now in effect, came the voice of Admiral Kethran, one of the collective's highest-ranking military leaders. All evidence of Project Silent Garden must be eliminated. No exceptions. Confirmed, Admiral, replied another voice. Target is the human vessel Steadfast and all personnel aboard. Are we authorized to use quantum torpedoes? Full authorization granted. Leave nothing but debris. The human government cannot be allowed to present evidence of our research. Programs to the Galactic Council. Kiralin's hands began to shake. She knew Admiral Kethran personally. He had visited her university during her graduation ceremony, speaking about the collective's commitment to peaceful scientific advancement. Now he was calmly ordering the murder of everyone on this ship, but the next transmission made her stomach drop even further. What about the Villani survivors? Asked a ship captain. Sensors show at least one of our people is still aboard the human vessel. All personnel associated with Project Silent Garden are considered compromised, Admiral Kethran replied without hesitation. Standard procedure is termination to prevent information leaks. No witnesses, no exceptions. The communication center fell silent except for the quiet hum of equipment. Every human in the room had heard the death sentence pronounced not just on themselves, but on Kira as well. She was no longer a citizen to be rescued. She was a liability to be eliminated. They're going to kill me too, she whispered, the words barely audible. My own people are going to kill me. Captain Jimin placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Sana continued monitoring the transmissions, her face growing paler with each passing message. Captain, they're discussing civilian casualties. There's a mining station about 50 kilometers from here with over 3,000 workers. The Villani fleet is planning to destroy it as well, claiming it might have witnessed their ships in the area. 3,000 innocent people, Jimin said quietly, to cover up their crimes. More voices crackled through the speakers. Villani commanders, discussing the best weapons to use, the most efficient way to eliminate all traces of the human ship. They spoke about mass murder, with the same casual tone they might use to discuss the weather. Kira listened to her people plan genocide and felt something break inside her chest. These were the leaders she had respected, the government she had served faithfully for her entire adult life. They had used her as an unwitting accomplice in torture, and now they were ready to murder her to keep their secrets safe. The escape pod we launched earlier, she said suddenly, her voice stronger than she felt. Dr. Helani and the others, are they safe? Lieutenant Sana checked her screens. They should reach the neutral zone before the fleet arrives. They'll survive. Good, Kira said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. At least someone will live to tell the truth. The transmissions continued, revealing the full scope of the collective's betrayal. Not just of the humans they had tortured, not just of the innocent people they were about to murder, but of every citizen who had believed in their lies about peace and scientific progress. As she listened to her own death warrant being signed by people she had once trusted, Kira realized that her real education was just beginning. The bridge of the Steadfast hummed with tense energy as red alert klaxons echoed through the corridors. 3 massive Villani warships had dropped out of hyperspace, their weapon systems already charging for the attack. On the main view screen, Kira could see the sleek, curved hulls of her people's most advanced destroyers, ships designed specifically for eliminating evidence and silencing witnesses. Shields up, evasive maneuvers, Captain Jimin ordered. Calmly, though sweat beaded on his forehead. How long until our reinforcements arrive? 47 minutes, reported the tactical officer. The Villani ships will be in firing range in 3. Kira stood frozen near the back of the bridge, watching her former people prepare to murder everyone who had shown her kindness. The humans around her worked with quiet efficiency, nobody panicking despite facing overwhelming odds. Even, now facing certain death, they maintained their strange sense of honor. Lieutenant Sana turned from her station, her face grim. Captain, they're charging quantum torpedoes. At this range, our shields won't hold. Sir, the helmsman called out, there's nowhere to run. They've positioned themselves to block all escape routes to human space. That's when it hit her. The memory came flooding back from her early survey missions, years before she had been assigned to the Gentle Current. She had mapped this region of space as a young graduate student, cataloging stellar phenomena for the university. "Wait," Kirillin said, stepping forward. Every human on the bridge turned to look at her. "There's another way." Captain Jimin's eyes sharpened with hope. "What do you mean?" "The Siren's Rest," she said, the old survey name coming back to her. "It's an asteroid field about 2 parsecs from here. Very dense, very dangerous. Most ships can't navigate it safely, because the asteroids contain heavy metals that interfere with sensors." "Most ships?" Sana asked. "Villani ships rely completely on their sensor arrays for navigation. If they can't see clearly, they can't follow." Kirillin moved to the navigation console, her hands shaking as she began entering coordinates. "But human ships use backup systems, manual piloting. You could make it through if you had someone who knew the safe paths." The bridge fell silent except for the approaching alarm that indicated the enemy ships were almost in range. Everyone was looking at her, and Kirillin realized they were waiting for her to make a choice that would define the rest of her life. "You know the safe paths?" Captain Jimin asked quietly. "I mapped them myself 6 years ago. Every route, every hiding spot." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "I can get you through. I can save you. The Villani fleet will." "No, you helped us escape," Sana warned gently. "There'll be no going back after this." Kirillin thought about the broken humans in the medical bay, tortured by her people's research. She thought about Dr. Yoon treating her injured crewmates with the same care he gave his own patients. She thought about Captain Jimin releasing innocent prisoners rather than risk civilian casualties. Then she thought about Admiral Kethran's cold voice, ordering her death along with everyone else just to keep his secrets safe. "There's nothing to go back to," she said firmly. "My people stopped being my people the moment they decided I was expendable. Incoming torpedoes," the tactical officer shouted. "Impact in 30 seconds. "Do it," Captain Jimin ordered. "Take us into the asteroid field." Kirillin's fingers flew over the navigation controls, inputting the complex route she had memorized years ago. "Follow my lead exactly. Don't deviate even by a few meters, or the asteroids will crush us." The Steadfast dove toward the swirling mass of rock and metal just as the first quantum torpedoes screamed past their hull. Behind them, the Villani ships followed, their commanders confident that no prey could escape their advanced technology. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 weeks later, Kirillin stood in the observation deck of Starbase Aurora, watching ships come and go through the busy space lanes of human territory. The rescue had been successful. Her navigation through the asteroid field had saved everyone aboard the Steadfast, while the pursuing Villani ships had been forced to retreat when their sensors failed in the dense metal clouds. But success felt hollow when she thought about what came next. "The asylum hearing went well," Lieutenant Sana said, joining her at the massive viewing window. "The review board approved your request unanimously. You're officially a resident of human space now." Kirillin nodded, though her heart felt heavy. "What happens to the evidence? The footage from my ship, the rescued prisoners?" "It's being presented to the Galactic Council next month," Sana replied. "Your testimony will be crucial. The survivors want to tell their stories, but having a Villani witness speak about what your government did, it carries more weight." Through the transparisteel, they watched a medical transport dock at the station. More survivors from other hidden laboratories, Kirillin realized. The Steadfast discovery had led to raids on dozens of similar research vessels. Hundreds of prisoners had been freed, though many would never fully recover from their ordeal. "I keep thinking about my old life," Kirillin said quietly. "Studying flowers in my lab, believing I was contributing to peaceful science. How could I have been so blind?" "You weren't supposed to see," Sana pointed out. "That was the whole point. They needed people like you, genuine scientists who believed in the mission to make the cover story believable." A young human girl ran past them in the corridor, chasing after what looked like a mechanical toy. She laughed as it rolled away, the sound bright and carefree. Kirillin watched her go, struck by how different this place felt from the rigid, controlled environments of Villani space. "I have something to ask you," Sana continued, pulling out a datapad. "Starfleet Command has approved a new position, Cultural Liaison for Alien Relations." They want someone who understands how these misunderstandings happen, how to prevent them in the future. Kira Lin looked at the official documents displayed on the pad. It was a real job, with real responsibilities. A chance to make sure other species didn't fall into the same trap her people had set. You're offering this to me? Who better? You've seen both sides now. You know how propaganda works, how good people can be manipulated into supporting terrible things without realizing it. Sana's expression was earnest. We need someone who can spot the warning signs before another situation like this develops, in E. The medical bay visible through another window, Kira Lin could see Dr. Kim working with a group of recovered prisoners. They were laughing at something, actually laughing despite everything they had endured. The resilience of these humans continued to amaze her. The collective will call me a traitor, she said. The collective already tried to kill you, Sana reminded her gently. What they call you doesn't matter anymore. Kira Lin thought about the escape pod that had carried her former crewmates to safety. Dr. Helani and the others would be telling their own stories now, spreading word about human mercy to anyone who would listen. Maybe some good could come. From all this tragedy I accept, she said finally, but I have one condition. What's that? I want to help with the survivor rehabilitation program too. The people who were tortured on my ship. I need to do something for them. I need to try to make amends. Sana smiled, the first truly happy expression Kira Lin had seen from her in weeks. I think that can be arranged. As they walked toward the administrative offices to finalize the paperwork, Kira Lin caught her reflection in a polished wall panel. She looked older somehow, marked by the knowledge of what her people were capable of, but she also looked determined. 2. Real monsters had indeed worn familiar faces and spoken with voices like her own. Now it was her job to make sure no one else fell for their lies.